Hey gang, um, I apologize in advance for how rough I may look and may sound for this one. The Yesterday I went and had skin cancer burned off my face in the morning, and that turned out to be the least painful thing that happened all day. The My eyes are puffy and I'm kind of snotty because I've been literally been chopping onions. I just ate lunch, uh, and also I've been chopping onions because my incredible friend Mark Lanegan died yesterday, and I've been struggling to process that um, because he really felt like an immortal. Um, it felt like he had been dead so many times and returned that he had beaten death so many times that I thought he'd beaten it forever. Um, I figured he would be burying me and not the other way around. The But I had hoped to have Mark as a guest on this podcast, so there will be no guest today. Um, I always thought that Bill Burr was a total psychopath for being able to just talk into the mic by himself for hours at a time. But I'm certainly feeling crazy enough today, so I'm gonna attempt to do the same thing and see if I can hold my pee for that long and see if I can hold my tears for that long to try to give you guys a um, sort of a history of my friendship with Lanegan and how what he meant to me, all the ways in which he meant something to me. The um, I want to say too, I got so many messages from people yesterday, um, expressing their condolences and also expressing genuine concern for my well being. I'm okay. I'm fucking heartbroken, and I'm gonna cry a lot through this, but that is your body's perfect mechanism for processing grief. The I I'm heartbroken, but I'm not gonna drink. I'm not gonna do anything to hurt myself. The Lanigan would not be pleased. the so I'm just gonna try and put it all together, sort of how he came into my life, and the it's, I guess, the history of our friendship and how we work together. Give you guys a little sort of glimpse behind the scenes. Um, I'm not gonna start at the very beginning with me discovering his music. Instead, I'm gonna start in this was maybe 2014 or 2015. The My old friend Zach Lopez was running uh, a public speaking night um, at Mike Studo's hi-fi bar in Manhattan, and Zach invited me to read a piece, and nothing that I had sort of ready to go was appropriate for words and music. The name of their night about music writing, basically. So I just sat down and I tried to write a record review of Mark Lanegan's Bubblegum, a record that that's been incredibly meaningful to me. So I showed up that night, and Zach introduced me by saying he has a voice like Mark Lanegan 10 years in the grave. Give it up for my old friend, Mishka. And I was like, you motherfucker, I'm reading a piece about Lanegan. And this is the piece that I read. I'll be reading it off my phone because my fucking Wi-Fi is down. Anyway, this is called 1500 Words That Won't Tell You What Mark Lanegan's Bubblegum Sounds Like. At age 26, you run out of markers. Your adolescence is just first after first after first. First wet dream, first period, first guilty masturbation, first fight, first drunk, first boob touch, first weird homoerotic dream, first crotch warmth detected through jeans, first high, first shoplifting, first lay, first heartbreak, first blackout. So too with rock and roll. Emblematic, iconic first after first. Look what the Cat dragged in. Appetite for Destruction. London Calling. And Justice for All. Out of Step. The Real Thing. Nothing's Shocking. Sticky Fingers. Nevermind. Highway 61 Revisited. Surfer Rosa. In the Flatfield. Revolution Girl Style Now. Extra Width. This is, of course, a revisionist history, as all history is revisionist, because genocide may be easier to explain than an affinity for the Steve Miller Band and House of Pain. But by the time you turn 26, you've run out of firsts. You've been living in a black hoodie and jeans for 10 years now. You're past all the good birthdays, and you look forward to each new PJ Harvey or Dinosaur Jr. or Nick Cave record the same way you look forward to your next infantilizing breakup. Like you look forward to ravers or rednecks inventing a new drug. The same way you look forward to May and that slushy, interminable Bushwick March. It's not going to be mind-blowing. It's not going to be devastating or overpowering in its newness. Just the next in a series. Not great, but good. Or at least better than the last one, which by now you are incredibly sick of. This vast wasteland of being 26 will last 5 or 10 or even 20 years. A long, meaningless, undifferentiated string of years, lazily uncoiling like a spool of fishing line, knocked, unnoticed, off the side of a small wooden boat. Sure, at some later juncture, the loss of that spool will not just be noticed, but acutely missed. Wait, I could have sworn I had more. Shit. Dude, we might be fucked. But in the moment, that decade of being 26 will tumble into the vast ocean with not even a splash, just a tiny bloop, then disappear under the waves forever. Sometimes, during that sargasso of immature 26ness, a record will circle you like a wary lover. You catch a glimpse of the record at Asterisk, nearly falling down the stairs in 4-inch heels and Alice Cooper mascara. You make eye contact but don't speak. The next time you see her at darkroom on a Monday night, she looks worn, so much white foundation she looks almost blue. You talk for a second and you try to make a joke, but you're too drunk and she gives you a look, then spins on her stool to talk to her friend / drug dealer / driver. A full 2 years later, you encounter her alone in a booth at Kellogg's Diner, in that precarious window after Saturday last call before Sunday sunrise. She looks softer, her cheeks less gouged out, but it's impossible to tell if her face is swollen from tears or bruised or just that she's been eating for the first time in years. Now, finally, it's your time. The time for both of you together. Not because you're both desperate to unhinged, not because each of you has mercilessly fucked your way through every other potential mate from Crown Heights to Astoria, but because finally everything, the flickering fluorescent lights, the murmuring busboys, the cold eggs on the table between you, well, it means something. You will each fall into the other, and together you will spin a mucousy cocoon of insecurity and passive aggression and weird sex and Vicodin and cigarette ashes in coffee cups. You know, that thing that in this city of radically diminished expectations, that thing we call love. It was in this manner that I fell in love with a record. Bubblegum by Mark Lanegan. I'd been aware of Mark Lanegan since '92 as the singer of the Screaming Trees from that song from the Singles soundtrack. Yes, fuck you. I remember that, and I will force you to remember our collective folly. I'm not going to tell you about his life, the trouble with the law, the tractor accident, the heroin. I'm not going to defile Mark Lanegan by telling you he sounds like the bastard son of Artist X and Artist Y under the influence of Substance Z. I've heard Mark Lanegan compared to Tom Waits and Josh Homme, two artists I feel should quit music to pursue acting in a series of family comedy films with the same urgency that I feel Ice Cube should return to making records. I can tell you that I don't want Mark Lanegan to become an actor. I can tell you that I want him to continue making records like Bubblegum. When I was 27, Tony the Neck told me Bubblegum was a necessary record. But he was a couple of hours into tattooing me in his kitchen, and he had brought the ink down right onto my nipple. I was in so much pain that the importance of Bubblegum didn't register. When I next saw Tony the Neck, he was back in LA, and I was living out of my van. He told me again about Bubblegum, about how he had been banging coke and listening to methamphetamine blues on repeat, so high his vision was whiting out. This record sounded like something I could really use. Still, it was 3 years later when I finally picked it up, a dark time for me. I was living in the last dying breath of Greenpoint, working a construction gig out in Queens, which felt a lot like admitting defeat. But there were two good things in my life: Bubblegum and a potent pink painkiller that cut up so nicely it was almost like it had been designed by scientists in lab coats for the express purpose of being snorted off a CD case with a rolled up post-it note. They were two secrets which together didn't add but multiplied in power. When I got high and listened to Mark Lanegan sing "When I'm Bummed" and milk that last word till it was nearly 4 syllables, like when P.W. Long says, "gun," well, that was everything. It was a dark time, but those two secrets made it so I was okay. You may respect someone, you may admire them, you may be attracted to them, you may wish for great things for them, you may want to fuck them so bad it feels like you are afflicted with an illness. None of this equates to love. One telltale sign of true love is pestering your friends about the merits of the object of your affection. Affection they will never share. Merits they can never comprehend. Wait, really? Her? Dude, she looks like Lydia from the Beetlejuice cartoon. There will be bitter sexual jealousy. I recall a friend telling me about walking into Motor City in the late 90s with his new girl. Her ex walked by, scowled at her, and growled, "No one will ever eat your pussy like I could." Lastly, love requires some straight-up irrational insanity. I was drunk at dinner with a girlfriend and her parents one night, and I sank into a jealous sulk, silently fuming at how unfair it was that they had known her longer than I had. This is the jerk I became with Bubblegum. I pushed it on my friends, ranting drunkenly about its perfection. I envied bitterly Mark Lanegan's tractor accident, imagined in erotic detail those huge tires crushing my own legs. Bubblegum, no one will ever eat your pussy like I could. There's a new Mark Lanegan record out, but I haven't listened to it. When I was 20, I drank a lot of wine. You know, Carlo Rossi, jug wine with the metal cap. One of my roommates suggested that I should take a class about wine, or at least read a book. You know, if I was so passionate about wine, why not learn something about it? Must I explain to you how fucking idiotic this is? I have found something that makes me happy. Why would I go about the dull business of learning when that effort could jeopardize this fragile, narrow pleasure I have found? If Bubblegum is composed mostly of grain alcohol and purple food coloring, I don't want to know about it. I am not entirely selfish, so I will tell you that you should listen to Bubblegum. I'm not going to tell you what it sounds like. If you want to know Bubblegum as I have known Bubblegum, just turn on the instant porn machine in your closet of a bedroom, or the instant porn machine in your pocket. Then you can tell me what it sounds like. I will tell you what it felt like. Listening to Bubblegum felt like being in love. Listening to Bubblegum felt like being loved. Pitchfork gave it a 7.2. So I guess that was the first public forum in which I declared my lasting affinity for Mark Lanegan's work, and the response I got from people that night was incredible. Will Sheff from why can't I ever think of anyone's band? You know who Will Sheff is. The Rob Sheffield from Rolling Stone was there, and he cornered me in front of Will Sheff, to tell me how brilliant I was, and Will, do you know Mishka? And man, that was fucking amazing. It was so good. Rob Sheffield is such a great writer, and it just felt incredible. And then Sheffield got up and read this elegiac piece for Ronnie Spector, that was just incredible and devastating. It had us on our feet, like cheering, and that such a fantastic writer would esteem what I had written. It was a tremendous night. So I ended up finding a home for that piece and got it published. And when I got it published, I tweeted it out and I tagged Lanegan. And I felt a little weird, a little insecure about it, because Lanegan had a reputation for being a real hard ass. But he retweeted it right away, and then he followed me, and I messaged him, and I said something like, I hope you enjoyed the record review. It was my intention for the piece to be called "No One Can Eat Your Pussy Like Mark Lanegan Can," and he wrote back something wry and funny, like, "You just said the only thing that you could that would diminish my enjoyment of your writing." Was that I had suggested that title and then not been able to get it through. So you got it. What's the Jane's Addiction line? I'll take my chances when I get them. So with chatting back and forth with Lanegan, I was like, listen, forgive me this fanboy move, but can I send you a copy of my book? Your work was listening to Bubblegum and Here Comes That Weird Chill. It brought me so much comfort in such hard times that I actually had thanked Lanegan in my memoir, and titled one of the chapters off of one of his song lyrics. And he said, yeah, here's my address, please send it. And I sent it, and then I didn't hear anything. And a couple of months later, I was like, fuck it, man. There have been, many times in this life where I had an opportunity and I was too timid to follow up. And I was like, it's Lanegan, like, you got, at the risk of being annoying or whatever, you have to try. So I messaged him and I was like, hey, just checking in to see if you'd had a chance to read the book. And he wrote back right away, and he was like, I'm so sorry, I've been busy, but I have it right here, and I'm gonna start it tomorrow. And I was like, all right, it's good that you messaged him, but he's not gonna start it tomorrow, because who would do that? The next day, I was on tour. I was in Scotland. I was in Edinburgh, and I got a DM from Lanegan. Hey, I started your book today. I'm a third of the way through it. I've been reading it all day. I'm really loving it, and I hadn't had a great show in Edinburgh that night, and I think the promoter had tried to sell me heroin or something like that, something weird, and a fan who became a friend had actually paid for a hotel room for me. So I just stayed up that whole night, just DMing with Lanegan, and I couldn't believe that he was reading my work at all, and that he enjoyed it enough to message me. He finished the book the next day, and I was like, thanks. I guess you liked it, but also, motherfucker, that took me 18 months to write. Like, slow down. He said, if you're ever in LA, hit me up and we'll get lunch. And I was like, you will live to regret those words, because I will do it. And I did. I was like, we didn't message for a while, and then I messaged, and I was like, hey, Mark, I'm going to be in LA. Any chance of us getting lunch? I'm going to be, there for this window to this window. And he was like, yeah, I'll be coming back from Seattle. I can maybe make that work. No promises yet. I didn't mention to him I booked the trip to LA just to get lunch with Mark. I was like, man, I'll feel like a real sucker if I go out there and then, he doesn't do it. But he did. He picked a restaurant, close to his house, and I went, and it was hot. It was a hot day. And I was like, am I gonna wear jeans and feel cooler but more uncomfortable? Or no, I hadn't even fucking brought jeans with me, because it was like the summer in California. Why would you bring jeans? So I went to go and meet one of my few living musical heroes in fucking shorts, like a child, like a schoolboy. And I was like waiting outside for him, and then he comes strolling around the corner, and I didn't even, I was like, wasn't even ready for it. And he's a tall dude, almost as tall as me, and he walks fast too, and he just sort of walked around the corner, and then he was right there, and he was like, hey, what's up, man? And like threw an arm around me, and we hugged. And that was the first, last, and only time that Lanegan and I ever hugged, I think. He sort of threw his arm around me, gave me a hug, and then let me go, looked down at my shorts, and like, and we went inside. So we went inside, and we ordered food and started talking and stuff. And really, within 90 seconds, we were talking about, like, death. We got to eat healthy. We're all gonna die. Where do you want to be buried? What do you want them to do with your body? And I was like, and I had like a moment of sort of self-reflection. I was like, Jesus Christ, you meet Mark Lanegan, and it in under 2 minutes you're talking about death and destruction and oblivion, and he sort of raised an eyebrow at me, and he was like, well, what are you here for, kid? And I said, well, I didn't want to get into it like right away, and possibly ruin our lunch, but I really think you should write a book. And he gave me a stink eye and was sort of like, man, I just got off the plane from Seattle. Bourdain was giving me the same shit. And I was like, well, if you don't listen to me, listen to him, but I did everything I could to try and sort of charm him and not force him into being my friend that day. But also I knew that I really, really wanted him to write a book, and that if he wrote a book, that it would be incredible. And when I went back home, we stayed in touch. He would text me, he would call me regularly, and we sort of just chatted. My girlfriend at the time called him Markina, because she said it was my other girlfriend, because she would sort of come home and find me sitting on the couch, like texting and giggling and like sort of waiting for the next text to come in. And she was like, oh, is that your other girlfriend, Markina? But we, Mark and I really, sort of became very close very quickly. The his friend Duke Garwood, who I'm a huge fan of, had been house sitting him, for him for a couple of weeks, and Duke had just recorded a record for on a 4-track sitting on Mark's dining room table, for Mark to do music to, and he was just blown away. He was an incredibly sweet dude. He was incredibly tough and incredibly hard, but also an incredibly sweet guy. And he was sort of openly touched by Duke's gesture of recording it, making a record in Mark's absence for Mark to do lyrics to. And Mark wrote words and recorded it in like a fucking week. I take like 5 years to make a record, and this musician who was, vastly more talented, his worst record is better than my best. He'll just bang it out in a week. I was stunned. And that was the thing about Lanegan, is that to be in his presence, it was like you were hanging out with a god. And I say a god, not the god, because he was like the sort of Greek and Roman gods, in that he was flawed, and he knew that he was flawed, and he was prone to jealousy and anger and insecurity, like we all are. But there was something about him that was not of this world. He was, 50% vampire and 50% werewolf and 50% man from outer space. He was just an incredible dude. And texting back and forth with him, I don't know, it fucking made me so happy. It brought me so much pleasure to text him jokes about, my unwilling little dick, and I could tell by his responses that I had actually made him laugh out loud, and he repeated them to his wife. Thanks, buddy. So they were both sort of laughing at my expense. But one of the things that was so powerful about Lanegan as an artist and as a friend was that he wasn't just a god. He was also a muse. So much narrative flowed through him. God damn it! I had my notepads from one of the first visits I made to his house, where I had was taking notes about all the all the stories that he wanted to tell, and I think I just threw them away because I was like cleaning house. I did that with the same fucking thing with a guitar signed by Merle Haggard just before Merle Haggard died. But Mark was absolutely a muse for me, and I think for a lot of other people. It was sort of like standing close to a high current power transformer, that there's so much energy flowing through it. There's so much narrative flowing through him, and poetry and darkness and light in a battle, that just to stand close to it, you could hear it, you could feel it, like it was just humming through him at all times. And he had the most intense eyes. I want to say, eyes like a great white shark. But that doesn't do it. That doesn't do him justice, because a shark does one thing. It eats, and his eyes were still full of life, sort of constant motion in them. And But he had these incredible 1,000-yard stare eyes, and I remember driving that big two-tone Chevy, the Unbookables van, up to his house in L.A. And his house was on a very steep hill, and the only spot there I had to parallel park to get into. So I'm parking this like 3/4 ton camper van on a very steep incline while one of my heroes is just sitting there smoking and casually watching me. Fucking, so many nerve-rattling experiences with him. But one of the things that happened around that time was he released the album Gargoyle, and I was supposed to read something when I was teaching at Yale, and I felt horribly insecure that I hadn't written anything new that year, and I'd read my piece about Lanegan the year before to rave reviews. So I just sat down one day in New York in a coffee shop. I think I was already living in Atlanta by this point, but started writing out this piece, and this ended up being the piece that I read at Yale that year, and my review of his new record at the time, which I think was 2017. So this piece is called Dancing to Mark Lanegan's Gargoyle. In hindsight, the year 2000 was a sweet spot of sorts, sandwiched, as it was, between the bogus doomsaying of Y2K and the boundless terror of 9/11. I was 22, living in New York City, working as a barback in a huge dank cavern of a nightclub near the West Side Highway called Dawn Hills. I worked Tizwas, the Britpop night. I worked Squeezebox, the sleazy 70s glam night. I worked Rock Candy, that corpse violation of American culture known as 80s night. Yes, 80s night was an abomination. The crush of sweaty bodies, the hair gel, the sickening bath of cologne, the fingering or getting fingered on the dance floor. But it's not like every night wasn't an abomination. I recall specifically the waning hours of one Saturday night Tizwas Britpop party. Several well-muscled young men surrounded a fallen comrade face down on the bar. Were they wearing backwards baseball hats and muscle shirts, or is that just the cruelty of my memory? They began shouting along with the melody from the Verve's bittersweet symphony, but these young man-apes substituted a more poignant refrain. You can't hang, you can't hang, you can't hang. One pounded the object of their attention on the back with a simian paw, and he gurgled, then weakly vomited clear liquid onto the bar. I don't want to give you the mistaken impression that something at Dawn Hills had soured. It was a West Side Manhattan nightclub close to the Holland Tunnel at the end of the millennia. It was exactly like a West Side Manhattan nightclub close to the Holland Tunnel at the end of the millennia. One night, a girl asked me if I had coke. I mean, girls always asked me if I had coke, but this night I did have coke. I had found a crusty, yellowed half-40 bag on the floor. I hesitated for a split second because I wasn't sure I wanted to share this secret treasure I had discovered. In that split second of hesitation, the girl wordlessly pulled her black half-shirt up to reveal pale white breasts. Like some robotic vending machine, I wordlessly handed her the coke, and she disappeared with it. I never saw her breasts or the coke again. Like I said, it was a sweet spot of sorts. The club was a cult of youth, reckless youth, kamikaze youth, youth that sprang to life at midnight. We had no fear of death, but all the fear of aging. I remember winding up in a girl's Williamsburg apartment one early morning. I considered her pathetic. She was 26 and still worked as a bartender. I intended to have a book published by 25 and be dead by 30. I was never even able to hold on to a job as a bartender. But there was this one guy. He was old. Not just older, but legit old. 50 or maybe even 60. At least a hard, craggy, unfiltered Pall Mall's 50. Hepatitis 50. He was friends with Jessica, the waitress with syringe mosquitoes tattooed on her chest. His hair was thin, spiked, blonde, gray blonde. His hair, his flesh, everything appeared an unearthly blue in the lights from the club. His eyebrows were brutally severe, and his face looked like it had been carved from a stone. His eyes were soft and deep and sensitive. The eyes of a junkie often look like they have been built out of liquid eyeliner. Maybe it's Maybelline, maybe it's something stronger. When everyone came to Dawn Hills in 2s or 3s or packs, this man came alone. He had a couple of drinks he paid for, but he never creeped on girls, never made a problem. He showed up, he took his shirt off, he danced alone in a corner in his black leather pants, clumsily but with great feeling, like a lonesome grinning skeleton that has rented a flesh suit on a lark for an evening out on the town. He swayed and ground to Jesus and Mary Chain, Joy Division, New Order thundering out of speaker cabinets large and impassive as monoliths. And then he quietly disappeared into the night alone. His name was Robert Lund. And here my memory betrays me, but at least I know it betrays me. Memory crashes over you. It overwhelms you, everything at the same time. Unlike memory, real life unfolds in a linear fashion. First, you drink too much at work. Then you lose your night's wages in just 2 hands of poker to Gary, the British gangster who beats a customer bloody 2 or 3 times a year. Then you stumble out into the early morning, furious and stunned that you have worked for 10 hours for absolutely nothing. Then a rat runs over your foot in the subway. Then you kick it. Then you stomp it to death. Then you feel sick with grief, not for the tiny life you have just extinguished, but for the nearly erotic satisfaction the killing has brought you. No, in memory, everything happens simultaneously. When I recall Robert Lund, when I say the name Robert Lund, I recall everything I know about him, everything I later learned about him, everything related to him, and instantly it shrouds him. Robert Lund played the bouncer in the movie Suburbia. Robert Lund was married to the actress/musician/screenwriter Zoe Lund, who wrote 1992's Bad Lieutenant, my second favorite movie after The Wizard of Oz. Bad Lieutenant, which closes on Schooly D rapping over Kashmir, which led to a lawsuit and badass Abel Ferrara calling out the greatest rock band of all time, Led fucking Zeppelin. Direct quote, "Oh yeah, I'll strangle that cocksucker Jimmy Page," as if every fucking lick that guy ever played didn't come off a Robert Johnson album. Bad Lieutenant with magnificent, terrifying, full-frontal male nudity Harvey Keitel weeping and squawking like some horrifying featherless bird. The bottom of the bottom. The end of the end of the end. Zoe Lund as Keitel's alluring, toxic oracle in the movie. Pencil thin in a black leotard. Her red hair piled on her head like a coil of serpents. Incandescent Zoe Lund, who some anonymous shithead on YouTube deigned to describe as modern day hot. You fucking Philistine, don't you qualifier, don't you even gaze upon her, you Judas, you scum. Zoe Lund, dead at 37 in Paris, even cool and gorgeous in death. Her eerie widower, Robert Lund, I met in 2000, less than a year after his estranged wife's death. Robert Lund, harmless as he was sinister. The Robert Lund I would run into 10 years later in Greenpoint, his head shaved, a dent in his skull from, what, a bullet? Some dumb Long Island cop's truncheon? A trepanation experiment gone awry? That dent in his dome overflowed with narrative as I crawled home in Thursday morning clothes on a Sunday afternoon after snorting morphine and Opana for days and sleeping in my band's rehearsal space. Robert Lund. As I've said, my memory betrays me. Smash cut to 2001, after my friend Jacob has overdosed on speedballs and died, but before the towers have fallen. I am still working at Dawn Hills. It is less of a sweet spot. One night, I take too many painkillers at work and black out. I have recalled the events of most of my blackouts eventually, but never this one. I woke up on a dusty red Chesterfield in Brooklyn, in a home belonging to Robert Lund. I had fallen down at work, then began crying. When Jessica, the junkie waitress, tried to help me up, I tried to kiss her. This is a tidy little sketch of the shitty subman I was in my 20s. Jessica and Robert Lund put me in a cab and brought me back to his place in Brooklyn because I couldn't tell them where home was. I couldn't tell them where I was supposed to go. When I woke up, Robert Lund brought me a glass of water and we sat on his stoop looking out at Manhattan. I was here for the blackout in '77, he said. The whole city went dark, man. The skyscrapers looked like fucking tombstones. It was amazing, like the end of the world. Then he laughed. His laugh sounded like massive charred timber dragging on concrete. I did not become close friends with Robert Lund. He did not get me sober. He did not teach me the power of Tai Chi and poetry and forgiveness. He did not transform my life. But I've never been able to forget the sight of Robert Lund dancing alone in the darkness of Dawn Hills. If you, like me, endure the slow exsanguination of the soul that is social media, you are chided, you are implored, you are commanded several times a day to dance like no one is watching. But when we are hollowly admonished by friends and strangers to dance like no one is watching, what they mean is, dance like no one is watching if you are a white female ectomorph between the ages of 17 and 23 at the cultural wasteland of some overpriced festival like Coachella or Burning Man or South by Southwest, when you are quite sure not just that everyone is in fact watching, but also that you're dancing like no one is watching is being shot on an iPhone 7. Robert Lund actually danced like no one was watching. By accident, I was open to it, I bore witness to it, and I carry that burden to this day. I still struggle to comprehend it. There is no emoji for the way I feel about the memory of Robert Lund's half-naked body writhing before me in the dark. I intend this only as a word of caution. Keep your head down. Hold tight to your cell phone. Do not make direct eye contact. Binge on Netflix and Seamless and face stalking. Pull the blinds down, turn the air conditioning up. Do not dance like no one is watching, and do not look at someone who is. You may not be prepared for what you see. A man well past the flowering of youth. A man lounging towards the abyss. A man who has been crushed without being broken. A man who has lost more than he ever dreamed he would have. Not just standing, but still grinding, still spinning, still gyrating, still grinning. I think one of the things that I'm proud of in that piece is that I'm ostensibly writing about a record, but without saying a fucking word about the record, but I did get to write a lot about Robert Lund and a little bit about myself, and also at the end there, I conflate Robert Lund and Lanegan. Lanegan was the skeleton in the flesh suit. He was the man, who's been crushed without being broken. He's the man lounging towards the abyss. Okay, I got to keep going on this narrative. I still have a lot of ground to cover here. I put I tried to put Lanegan did not want to write the book, but I tried to put as much pressure as I could tactfully on him to write the book. The I knew that it was important, not just for him and for his legacy, but also for us. One of the things that I felt before I knew him, I only felt it stronger as I got to know Lanegan, was that he was the voice of experience. He was like me, but like my older brother, but he was also, it was like he was 400 years old because he had seen so much. He had been to the depths of heroin addiction, of meth addiction, of crack addiction, homelessness, strong arming people at ATMs for money. He had been to the outer limits of human experience, and at times he had been a monster. He had been a very bad man. He had seen horrible shit and he had done horrible things, but he never lost his humanity. And I think that he carried the burden of the bad things he had done out of anger, out of resentment, out of jealousy, out of weakness, out of service to his addiction. I think he remembered all of that, and I think it weighed terribly heavy on him. There was so much that, let me backtrack here. I was going to read it, but I'm sort of running out of time here. At one point, I'd been pushing him to write the book, and I didn't know if it was going to happen, and I was like, finally, I was like, you got to do this. You just got to fucking hit it with the big hammer. You got to give him everything you have, and tell him how and why he needs to write this book. And I sent him this email, and I was like, you are, you're like Orpheus. You have walked through hell and emerged, and it's transformed you, and you owe it to yourself to lay that burden down, and you owe it to us, your fans, your readers, the people who love you, to tell us what it was like. And I alone have survived to tell the tale. So I sent him this sort of fervent email late at night one night, and then after I hit send, I pushed myself back from the computer, sitting in this chair, and I said, well, that's it. I won't hear from him again. And I didn't hear from him for a week, and it sucked. And then he sent me a big chunk of writing, and it was the beginning of the book. And that ended up actually being the prologue, and it was fucking spot on. It was so good, so perfect. He had a lot of ideas of what he wanted to put in the book and what he didn't. There was a lot of stuff that he was adamant it wasn't going to go into the book, and somehow I coaxed him into putting it in there. I want to be real clear. I had no part in writing the book. I am not a co-author or ghostwriter or anything like that. It was Lanegan's work through and through. I was an editor, and I feel proud that I did make a contribution to it. But it was his work, his words, his and his alone. At one point we were hanging out at his in his backyard in LA, and he said, this is not going in the book, but I'm going to tell you this story, about how I finally got off heroin. And he described, Courtney Love putting him in a rehab in California so he could escape the cops, both the detective intent on taking him down and the gangsters who were out for him for ripping off a bunch of heroin. And he woke up there after, 4 days of nightmarish detox, and he had dreads down to his waist, and they had shaved his hair off. He had like cigarette butts in them and stuff from being homeless. And his arms were bandaged from his wrist up to his elbow. There's a reason why Lanegan always wore long sleeves. From his knuckles to his shoulders, it looked like he had been chewed by dogs. And so he woke up there on like a chaise lounge in the sunshine, and his hair shorn and bandaged up, and he sort of sent a probe out to God, saying like, if I'm going to do this, I need a sign from you. I need to know, and he said he felt like just this crystal moment of this like lightning bolt that went through his body, and he fell to his knees, and he said, at that moment I was changed instantly and forever. And I knew that that everything had to change, and that I would be a different person going forward. And I was like, what? Mark, are you shitting me? The number one, that story's going in the fucking book. You gotta put that story in the book. That's incredible. It's too phenomenal of a story for you not to put it in the book. And number two, that's how the book ends right there. That's incredible. That's my whole life I've prayed for that kind of fucking lightning bolt epiphany. I've never had one. And you describe it so perfectly. It's so powerful. Like was that really it? You just had that epiphany, and then you were sort of like bathed in white light, and I shall go forth and sin no more. And he was like, oh no, not at all. No, I relapsed many times, went back to that same facility until finally they banned me from it forever. And after the heroin, when I did finally get off heroin, there was crack and then meth. But that was when I made up my mind to change. And I laugh and I feel good about this story, about sharing this story, because it was the same as my experience. When I was 17, I recognized that I was an alcoholic and that I was going to have to make a change. And sure enough, a short 15 years later, I stopped drinking. The epiphanies are real, but often we need to have the same. But humans are thick. Often we need to have the same epiphany 10, 15, 20 times over the span of 9 years before we're actually ready to be like, okay, I get now that it's real. Another good story I want to tell on Lanegan about hanging out in his backyard is his wife, his partner, his bandmate, Shelly, still a very beautiful woman. And she and Lanegan just sort of like lived in black denim and leather jeans. And we were sitting back there one day. I think she ran out to get Starbucks for us or something, and then while we were yammering away, and then she came down and brought us the Starbucks, and my eyes lingered on her form a second too long. And I was looking at her ass, and then she moved out of the way, and Lanegan was just fixing me. And now it was that great white stare, just the black, dead eyes. I will bury you, and I will not give you a second thought. And I was like, fuck me. I've worked with a lot of people in my life, most of them not good people. Lanegan is the first person I ever worked with who I was afraid of. And to the point, and things often got heated enough between the two of us that I actually watched the YouTube clip of him fighting somebody at Roskilde in I think it was Denmark or Norway. I watched it so I could learn what he did before he threw hands. If he dropped his shoulder, if what his feet did, what his hips did, in case he threw a punch at me, I would be able to get out of the way. But having him catch me staring at his wife's ass in his own backyard, I was like, "You done fucked up, boy. They're gonna find your body back here in 10, 15, 20 years with a Bic pen stuck through your fucking jugular, because he's just gonna stab you to death with a pen and bury you in the backyard, and they'll never find you." And finally, a couple of months later, I sort of confessed to Lanegan that I had that thought and worried about it. And, I wanted to apologize to him for fucking leering at his wife like a dirtbag. And he was both gracious and sinister, as Mark was prone to be. And he said, "Shelley's a beautiful woman. She's always caught my eye. I would never, I could never blame anyone for, finding her attractive as well." And he said, "And I like you. I could never kill you, but you would look real good with an eye patch." And that was like a blessing from Lanegan. You'd look real good with an eye patch. Once, I'm going to tell a couple more stories here and then wrap up. Once we got the book sold, there was a little bit sort of like back and forth. I knew writing a book is hard, writing a book sucks, and I knew that he wouldn't get it done, that we wouldn't get it done unless somebody was holding our feet to the fire, because there's a lot of books that get not written that way. And I knew instinctively that the best home for it was with Ben Schaefer, a great editor who was also a huge fan of Lanegan's. And Lanegan wanted to self-publish and keep all the money, which is also a great idea, but I feared that we would never do it. So we sold the book to Ben Schaefer at Da Capo, and and I was like, "Congrats, Mark, we did it. I can't wait to read the book. It's going to be incredible." And he was like, "What? No, fuck you. I'm not doing this alone. You're doing this with me." And I was like, "Oh shit, this is the best and worst thing I can imagine." To get the opportunity to work with, to work with one of my heroes, to work with one of my idols, to work with an artist who has touched me like no other. And also, Lanegan was a fucking hard ass. And, to go into that project knowing that, that he was real hard-headed and that he could be menacing. I was excited about it and also not looking forward to it. But also, when that knock comes, you open the fucking door. One of my greatest regrets, I have a lot of regrets in my life. I am mostly regrets. I'm just a pile of regrets in a fucking black hooded sweatshirt. I don't have a lot of regrets about my relationship with Lanegan. I loved him, and I told him that I loved him multiple times. He told me that he loved me. And but he offered to produce my next he offered to produce my next record, and I really didn't have a record. And then fall of 2020, some real ill shit went down in my life, and I think I wrote 5 songs in 6 weeks, and I sent them to him, and he said, "This is it, man. This is the record. I'm going to produce it. Here, these are the parameters. You're going to come over, and we're going to do it in Ireland." And then I was the same shit that triggered writing the record triggered PTSD and hardcore depression and sort of anxiety and ennui and inertia, and insecurity, to the point that I never got, he had asked for demos, and he wanted us to get to work immediately, and I was like, I'm not going back over to Ireland in fucking December to do this record, even with Lanegan. We got to wait for the summer. And I was scared of working with him too. He promised that it would be rigorous, and I believed him. And I blew it. I missed that opportunity, and I will always regret that. But he dug those songs, and I had an idea for a screenplay that I had pitched him, and he was really into that. And I asked him if he would do the soundtrack. He said absolutely. Our buddy Roberto was gonna direct, and I promise I will finish that record by the end of the year. The record that Lanegan wanted to produce, and I will finish that screenplay. So Roberto, brace yourself. I've talked a lot of shit about my friend before his body is even cold. I don't regret it. Lanegan, he was a tremendous friend. He had a great sense of humor, and I don't think that he would want to be lionized as a tender man, though he was. And I don't think he would want to be remembered as a tender man without also being remembered as, someone who had been capable of brutality. He was both sides of the coin. They broke the fucking mold when they made Mark William Lanegan. I have an epitaph that he sent me, that his headstone would have to be like 9 feet long to fit this epitaph. It's like 3 paragraphs. I saved it somewhere. I will dig it out. He said, Shelley won't do it, but I'm counting on you. This is the epitaph that I want. I will post that. But one of the things I want to say about working with Lanegan, and I'll close on this, is that I can't recall if Mark finished high school. I don't think, I know he never went to college. He was a brilliant man. He was absolutely a genius. Incredible intellect, read voraciously, but he didn't know how to write a book. And though he delivered me this first passage that was near perfect, for opening the book and for putting the proposal together, when he gave me the materials for the first couple chapters, it was a fucking mess, and it took a lot of chopping and splicing, and okay, I'm going to put this here and move this around in order to string together a linear narrative and sort of make it all operate by the rules in which we tell a story that provides a reader with a connected, sort of supported reading experience where you always know where you are in the narrative. And we battled over some of the changes I wanted to make and the way that he wanted it. Once I dared to insert a sentence, and he fucking railed on me. I say that not to demonstrate what a hard ass he was, but so y'all know that it wasn't me pulling the strings. He had a very clear idea of what he wanted to write and what he didn't want to write, and he was going to do all the work, and he did. in like 4 months, which is incredible. But the those first 2 chapters were very rough, and we argued a lot about how a book should work, how a story should be told. By the last 3 or 4 chapters, I was correcting grammar and punctuation. Lanegan had like taught himself to drive on the Autobahn. That's how smart he was. And that's how humble that he was when it came to the writing. He knew that he, as experienced, he was as a lyricist, he knew that he didn't have any experience writing a narrative. And, a lot of people will say, I'm your humble student. Lanegan lived it, and I would give him feedback on a chapter at 11 in the morning, and at 3 p.m. that day, he would deliver to me a new chapter in which he had incorporated my input and my advice, my prescriptives, from 4 hours earlier. And he would never go back and make the same mistake. That's how fucking smart that guy was. He just soaked it up immediately on the fly and was able to make changes and move forward. I'm going to wrap this up. Not going to plug anything today. I think my next podcast guest is going to be my mom and then my friend Scott Coomer. But, I don't know how to end this. Mark, I loved you dearly. I'm fortunate to love a lot of people in my life. But the love that I have for you, is unlike any love I had for anybody else in my life. You were completely singular. And till the day that I die, I will mourn losing you as a friend, as a mentor, as a brilliant artist. But already, even by yesterday afternoon, I was struck by how fucking lucky I was to have you in my life at all. How lucky to have your art in my life, your stories, your voice, your incredible lyrics. How lucky I was to have you in my life as a friend. Mark, thank you.